As blood-red twilight bathed River Oak Village, Isolde Thorne stood alone amidst the chaos. While others fled screaming into the darkness, she remained perfectly still, the eye of a human storm. Not from courage, though she possessed it in abundance, but from the quiet resignation of one who had already survived the worst life could offer. When death had taken her parents, leaving her to raise her sister alone, Isolde had learned that panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. Now, as the massive wolves and shifters of the Ironwood pack stormed through her village, their howls piercing the night like blades, she felt that familiar stillness settle over her. Fear was there, yes, she wasn't foolish, but it had no dominion over her. Not anymore. It was this preternatural calm that caught Alpha King Kaelin's attention. Among the fleeing, the begging, the broken, she alone faced him with eyes unclouded by terror. In that singular moment, something passed between them, a recognition neither understood but both felt to their core. What Isolde couldn't know was how her steadiness would shake his foundations. What Kaelin couldn't foresee was how her next decision would challenge everything his pack believed about humans, about power, about him. In a world where wolves ruled through strength and humans survived through submission, they were about to forge something dangerous and new, something that would either unite two worlds or tear them both apart. Before we begin, remember to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Every day, a new story awaits you. Now, let us begin. The sky bled crimson as the sun set over River Oak Village. Isolde Thorne wiped her hands on her apron, observing the telltale dust cloud rising from the northern ridge. For days, the village elders had dismissed her warnings about wolf tracks circling ever closer. Now, as howls pierced the evening air, those same elders were scrambling to organize a defense that would prove as effective as paper against flame. "Get inside," Isolde instructed her younger sister Mira, who clutched at her skirts with trembling hands. "Go to the cellar and don't come out until I call for you." "What about you?" Mira's voice cracked, her eyes wide with terror. "Someone needs to face them," Isolde replied, her voice unnaturally steady. "If we all hide, they'll burn every house to find us." The truth hung unspoken between them. The shifter packs of the north had grown bold in recent months. Villages that resisted were razed to the ground. Those that surrendered became tributary states, humans reduced to servants, providing food, labor, and worse to their wolf overlords. As Mira disappeared into the house, Isolde removed her apron and smoothed down her simple blue dress. She had no weapons, no armor, only the calm that had been her shield since childhood, when her parents had died and left her to raise Mira alone. Panic was a luxury she'd never been able to afford. The first wolves crested the village green as the last rays of sunlight disappeared. Massive creatures, larger than natural wolves, with intelligent eyes that gleamed with something beyond animal instinct. Behind them came the shifters in human form, warriors clad in leather and furs, their movements fluid and predatory. Screams erupted across the village. A house to the east burst into flames, illuminating the scene in flickering orange light. Isolde remained in the center of the green, watching, waiting. Then she saw him. Unlike the others, he wore no expression of bloodlust or cruel amusement. The Alpha King's face remained impassive as he surveyed the chaos, his warriors fanning out around him. He stood tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair pulled back from a face that might have been carved from stone. His eyes, amber like autumn sunlight, caught the firelight and held it. Those eyes found Isolde, standing motionless amid the panic. For 3 heartbeats, they simply stared at each other. Isolde felt something strange pass between them. Recognition, perhaps, though they had never met. Or maybe it was simply the shock of finding stillness in the center of a storm. A warrior approached her, lips curled in a snarl. "Kneel before Alpha King Kaelin, human," he spat, circling her like prey. Isolde didn't move. Her gaze remained fixed on the Alpha King. "Are you deaf?" The warrior grabbed her arm, his claws extending to pierce her skin. "I said, release her." Kaelin's voice cut through the air like a blade, low and commanding. The warrior instantly dropped his hand and stepped back. Kaelin approached slowly, his movements measured, deliberate. Around them, the village burned. People screamed. But in the space between them, time seemed suspended. "You're not afraid," he observed, stopping a few paces from her. It wasn't a question. "I'm terrified," Isolde corrected him, her voice surprisingly steady. "But fear doesn't help anyone right now." A flash of something, surprise perhaps, crossed his face before the mask of indifference returned. "Your village belongs to the Ironwood Pack now," Kaelin stated. "Your people will serve us. Those who resist will die." Isolde nodded once. "I understand. Then why aren't you running? Or begging?" His head tilted slightly. "Everyone does one or the other. Would either change anything?" The corner of his mouth twitched. "No. Then I'll save us both the indignity." A laugh erupted from one of the warriors, quickly silenced by Kaelin's sharp glance. When he turned back to Isolde, his expression had changed. Something calculating had entered his gaze. "What's your name?" he demanded. "Isolde Thorn." "Well, Isolde Thorn," he said, her name strange on his tongue. "What do you propose instead of running or begging?" The question hung in the air between them. All around, wolves had paused in their destruction, sensing something significant unfolding. The village had fallen eerily quiet, save for the crackle of flames. Isolde took a step forward, close enough now that she could see the flecks of gold in Kaelin's amber eyes, close enough that any of his warriors could tear her throat out in an instant. She felt rather than saw them tense, ready to attack this human who dared approach their king. "Choose me," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the green. Kaelin's eyebrows rose fractionally. "Choose you? As your envoy, your liaison." Isolde held his gaze. "You need someone who understands humans to help you rule them effectively. Someone they trust, who can ensure they meet your demands without needless bloodshed. And why would I need that?" Kaelin's voice had dropped lower, almost intimate in its menace. "Fear is an effective motivator. Fear breeds resentment. Resentment leads to rebellion, no matter how hopeless." Isolde gestured to the burning village around them. "You can rule through terror and spend all your time crushing uprisings, or you can rule through order and focus on whatever larger ambitions brought you here in the first place." A murmur rippled through the gathered wolves. Kaelin remained silent, studying her with those unreadable eyes. "Besides," Isolde continued, "you've already chosen me. Otherwise, I'd be dead for speaking to you like this." The silence stretched between them, taut as a bowstring. Then Kaelin threw back his head and laughed, a sound so unexpected it sent chills down Isolde's spine. "You have courage, human," he said, amusement still evident in his voice. "Or perhaps it's madness. I've been told they look similar from a distance." Kaelin circled her slowly, assessing. Isolde felt his gaze like a physical touch, but refused to turn to follow his movement. She kept her eyes forward, her back straight. "Very well," he said finally, coming to stand before her once more. "You will come with us to the Ironwood stronghold. You will help your people understand their new duties, and you will answer directly to me." Relief flooded through Isolde, though she was careful not to let it show. This was only the first step. "And my sister?" she asked. Kaelin's eyes narrowed. "Sister? She's 13. I won't leave her behind." For a moment, Isolde thought she had pushed too far. The Alpha King's expression darkened, and several warriors stepped forward, sensing their leader's displeasure. "You presume to make demands of me?" Kaelin's voice had lost its amusement. "I presume nothing," Isolde replied, forcing herself to maintain eye contact despite the fear coursing through her. "I simply state a fact. I cannot serve you effectively if I'm worried about her safety." Kaelin studied her for what felt like an eternity. Then with a slight nod, he said, "The sister comes too." A collective gasp rose from the wolves. Never had their alpha conceded anything to a human. "Gather what you need," Kaelin instructed, turning away. "We leave at dawn." As he walked away, Isolde finally allowed herself to exhale. Her legs trembled with the aftermath of terror, but she remained standing. Around her, the wolves were watching with newfound wariness, as if she were something more dangerous than they had initially assumed. One warrior, a woman with a scar running down her cheek, approached cautiously. "What did you do to him?" she demanded, her voice low enough that only Isolde could hear. "Nothing," Isolde replied honestly. The woman's eyes narrowed. "The Alpha King does not change his mind. He does not grant favors to humans." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Whatever game you think you're playing, be careful. Those who catch his interest rarely survive his attention for long." With that ominous warning, she turned and followed her king, leaving Isolde alone in the center of the ruined village, the weight of what she had done settling over her like ash from the still burning homes. She had saved her sister. She had saved her village from immediate slaughter, but as she watched the Alpha King disappear into the night, his powerful form silhouetted against the flames, Isolde wondered if she had just made a bargain with a demon she had no hope of controlling. Dawn broke cold and gray over the smoldering remains of River Oak. Isolde stood at the edge of the village green, a small pack slung over her shoulder, her sister's hand clutched tightly in her own. They had spent the night gathering what little they could carry: clothes, medicines, the locket containing a lock of their mother's hair. The wolves had been mercifully quiet after Kaelin's departure, keeping watch rather than continuing their destruction. Still, the village bore the scars of their initial attack. 3 houses had burned to the ground. 5 villagers lay dead, their bodies now being prepared for burial by hollow-eyed survivors. Mayor Collins approached Isolde, his normally pompous demeanor subdued. "Are you certain about this?" he asked, eyeing the wolves gathering at the northern end of the village. "We don't have a choice," Isolde replied. "There's always a choice." His voice dropped to a whisper. "We could fight." Isolde gave him a level look. "And die. All of us." The mayor had no response to that. Instead, he pressed something into her hand. A small knife with a bone handle, its blade no longer than her palm. "It was my wife's," he said, "for cutting herbs, ostensibly. But the edge is sharp." Isolde slipped it into her boot. "Thank you. Just come back to us if you can." Before she could respond, a shadow fell over them. The female warrior from the night before stood watching, her scarred face impassive. "Time to go," she said. Mira's grip tightened painfully on Isolde's hand. "I'm scared," she whispered. Isolde squeezed back. "I know, but remember what I told you. Don't show it," Mira finished, straightening her shoulders despite the tremor in her voice. The wolf warrior led them to where Kaelin waited, mounted on a massive black stallion. Unlike the previous night, he now wore formal attire, a deep blue tunic embroidered with silver thread, black leather pants, and a cloak lined with wolf fur. A circlet of twisted silver rested on his brow, marking him as royalty. He looked less like a marauding warlord, and more like the king he claimed to be. His amber eyes assessed them coolly. "You travel light," he observed. "We don't have much," Isolde replied. Something flickered across his face, perhaps surprised that she would admit such vulnerability. "You'll ride with Lyra," he said, nodding toward the scarred female warrior. "The child will ride with Thorn." A broad-shouldered warrior with russet hair stepped forward, his expression neutral as he looked at Mira. The girl shrank back against Isolde. "She stays with me," Isolde said firmly. Kaelin's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You presume to give orders again, human?" "I presume to tell you what will work," Isolde countered, meeting his gaze. "She's terrified. If you separate us, she'll panic. A panicked child on horseback is a danger to herself and others." For a moment, tension crackled between them. The gathered wolves watched with bated breath, clearly expecting their alpha to put this presumptuous human in her place. Instead, after a long moment, Kaelin gestured to Lyra. "Take them both, then," he ordered, turning his horse. "Try to keep up." Lyra's lips pressed into a thin line, but she nodded. "Yes, Alpha." As Kaelin rode ahead, Lyra helped Isolde and Mira onto her dappled gray mare. "You're either very brave or very foolish," she muttered. "Probably both." "What's your name?" Isolde asked as they began to move. "Your full name." The warrior hesitated, then answered, "Lyra Moonstone." "Thank you for not killing us, Lyra Moonstone." A surprised snort escaped the wolf. "The day is young yet, human." They rode north through dense forest, following game trails too narrow for the villagers to navigate, but seemingly familiar to the wolves. By midday, they had left the settled lands behind, entering wild territory where humans rarely ventured. The trees grew taller here, ancient and sprawling, their massive roots breaking through the earth like the backs of sleeping giants. Mira had fallen into an exhausted sleep against Isolde's chest, the tension of the morning finally overtaking her. Isolde herself remained vigilant, cataloging landmarks, estimating distances, studying the wolves around them. If they needed to escape, she wanted to know which direction to run, not that running would help against wolves. "He's watching you," Lyra said suddenly, her voice low. Isolde followed her gaze to where Kaelin rode at the head of the column. True enough, the Alpha King had turned in his saddle, his amber eyes fixed on her with unsettling intensity. "Why?" Isolde asked. Lyra shrugged. You're a curiosity. Humans usually don't speak to him as you do. What happens to the ones who do? They don't get to do it twice. The implication hung between them, unspoken but clear. Isolde was an anomaly, and anomalies rarely survived in the wild. As the afternoon waned, the forest began to thin, giving way to rocky highlands. And there, nestled among the stone like it had grown from the earth itself, stood the ironwood stronghold. Isolde had expected a primitive fort. Perhaps. What she saw instead took her breath away. The stronghold was a sprawling complex, built into the mountainside, its walls rising seamlessly from the natural rock. Towers of gray stone reached toward the sky, connected by covered walkways and buttresses, banners bearing the sigil of the Ironwood Pack. A wolf's head surrounded by a thorny crown fluttered in the highland wind. It was beautiful, in a stark, imposing way, and utterly impregnable. "Welcome to your new home," Lyra said, a hint of pride in her voice. Guards at the massive iron gates straightened as they approached, bowing their heads in deference as Kaelin passed. The courtyard beyond bustled with activity. Shifters in both human and wolf form moved with purpose, carrying supplies, training with weapons, attending to various tasks. All paused as the returning party entered, their curious gazes lingering on the human passengers. Kaelin dismounted in one fluid motion, handing his reins to a waiting attendant. He approached Lyra's horse, looking up at Isolde. "Bring them to the east wing," he instructed Lyra. "The chambers overlooking the valley." Lyra's eyes widened slightly. "Alpha, those are guest quarters, not—" "I know what they are," Kaelin cut her off. "See that they're settled, and find something suitable for them to wear for tonight's council." With that, he strode away, warriors and attendants parting before him like water around a stone. "What just happened?" Isolde asked as Lyra helped them dismount. The warrior shook her head, looking troubled. "He's put you in rooms reserved for visiting dignitaries, not where humans usually stay. And that's bad?" "It's unprecedented," Lyra replied, "and it will not go unnoticed." As if to underscore her point, a tall, elegant female shifter approached, her movements graceful yet predatory. Her hair, white blonde and flowing to her waist, contrasted sharply with the deep crimson of her gown. "So these are the humans everyone's talking about," she said, her voice melodious yet cold. Her gaze slid over Isolde dismissively before settling on Mira, who had woken and was watching with wide, frightened eyes. "How quaint." "Lady Serena," Lyra acknowledged with a stiff nod. "The Alpha has instructed me to settle our guests." "Guests?" Serena laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Is that what we're calling them now? How diplomatically vague." She stepped closer to Isolde, inhaling deeply. "They smell of fear and ash. Have them bathed before the council at least." Isolde met the woman's icy blue stare. "We appreciate your concern for our hygiene, my lady." Serena's perfect eyebrows rose. "It speaks, and with such impertinence." She turned to Lyra. "Kaelin's charity toward strays grows tiresome. Remind these guests of their place before someone less forgiving than I decides to show them." With that, she swept away, several attendants falling into step behind her. "Who was that?" Isolde asked, watching the woman's retreating form. "Lady Serena Frostfang," Lyra replied, "daughter of the Northern Alpha and Kaelin's betrothed." Isolde felt an unexpected twist in her stomach. "I see." "No, you don't," Lyra said grimly. "But you will. Come, let's get you settled before anyone else decides to welcome you to Ironwood." The East Wing was as luxurious as Lyra's reaction had suggested. The chambers assigned to Isolde and Mira featured high ceilings, large windows overlooking the forested valley below, and furnishings of polished wood and rich fabrics. A fire had been lit in the hearth, warding off the highland chill. "There's a bathing chamber through there," Lyra explained, pointing to a side door. "Hot water will be brought up. I'll find you something to wear." "Why is the Alpha King doing this?" Isolde asked. "Treating us like honored guests instead of prisoners?" Lyra shook her head. "I don't know, but whatever game he's playing, be careful. There are those who would hurt you just to spite him." After Lyra left, Mira explored the chambers with cautious excitement, the opulence momentarily distracting her from their precarious situation. "Isolde, look," she called, opening a wardrobe. "These clothes are beautiful." Indeed they were. Gowns of fine silk and wool, far more luxurious than anything they had owned in River Oak. Isolde frowned. Had these chambers been prepared in advance? How had Kaelin known to accommodate women rather than men? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Tensing, Isolde positioned herself between Mira and the entrance before calling, "Enter." The door opened to reveal Kaelin himself, now dressed in simpler attire than his riding clothes, though no less regal. He paused at the threshold, seemingly surprised by Isolde's protective stance. "May I come in?" he asked, the politeness at odds with his status. Isolde nodded, though she didn't relax her posture. "It's your stronghold, Your Majesty." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "So it is." He stepped into the room, his presence immediately making it feel smaller. "Are the accommodations satisfactory?" "They're more than we expected," Isolde answered honestly. Kaelin's gaze moved to Mira, who had pressed herself against the far wall. "Your sister?" When Isolde nodded, he added, "She's younger than I anticipated. Does that matter?" "It might." He turned back to Isolde. "Tonight, I will present you to my council. They will question you about your village, its resources, its people. Answer truthfully. And if I don't know something, say so. Lying will not serve you well here." Isolde studied him, trying to discern his intentions. "Why am I being presented to your council? I thought I was to be a liaison to my people, not yours." Kaelin's expression revealed nothing. "Your role is what I decide it is. For now, you will help my council understand what they've acquired, and what happens after that." He stepped closer, close enough that Isolde had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. She caught his scent, pine and wood smoke and something wild beneath it all. "That depends on you, Isolde Thorne." The way he said her name sent an involuntary shiver down her spine. "On my usefulness?" she guessed. "On your adaptability." He reached out suddenly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The contact was brief, but electric. "Wolves respect strength. Show fear, and you become prey. Show strength, and I become competition," Isolde finished. Kaelin laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "Clever human. Perhaps that's why you interest me." Before she could respond, he turned and walked to the door. "Servants will come to help you prepare. Be ready by sundown." With that, he was gone, leaving Isolde with more questions than answers, and the lingering sensation of his touch on her skin. "Is he going to eat us?" Mira whispered once the door had closed. Despite everything, Isolde found herself smiling. "No, little one, I don't think that's what he wants from us at all." "Then what does he want?" Isolde stared at the closed door, remembering the intensity in Kaelin's amber eyes. "I'm not sure yet," she admitted, "but I intend to find out." As promised, servants arrived. Human servants, Isolde noted with interest. They brought hot water, helped them bathe, and laid out clothing for the evening. A deep green gown for Isolde, and a simpler blue one for Mira. They braided Isolde's dark hair with silver threads, and even applied a light touch of cosmetics to her face. Throughout the preparations, Isolde asked careful questions, learning what she could about life in the stronghold. The servants were cautious at first, but eventually revealed small insights. The Alpha King was fair, but ruthless. Lady Serena was feared by the human staff. The territories under Ironwood control had expanded rapidly in recent months. By the time they were ready to depart for the council meeting, Isolde had formed a clearer picture of the political landscape she had entered. The Ironwood pack was ascendant, absorbing smaller packs and human settlements in what appeared to be a calculated campaign of expansion. Not all the wolves were happy about it, particularly the older ones who valued tradition and stability. And at the center of it all was Kaelin, ambitious, mysterious, and now, for reasons Isolde couldn't fathom, focused on her. As Lyra arrived to escort them to the council chambers, Isolde squared her shoulders and took a deep breath. She had faced down the Alpha King in the midst of invasion. She could face his council now. But as they walked through the stone corridors of Ironwood, Isolde couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into something far more dangerous than she had anticipated. A political web, whose threads she was only beginning to perceive. And somewhere in that web waited Kaelin, watching her with those amber eyes that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed calm. The Great Hall of Ironwood lived up to its name. Massive timber beams arched overhead like ancient ribs, while torches cast dancing light across stone walls adorned with tapestries of wolf hunts. At the far end, a raised dais held the council table, with Kaelin at its center in a throne-like chair of carved oak and silver. Isolde felt the weight of dozens of eyes as Lyra led her and Mira into the hall. Shifters lined the walls, some in human form, others as wolves. Silence fell at their entrance, broken only by their footsteps on stone. Beside Kaelin sat Lady Serena in crimson, her pale skin and hair glowing like moonlight. Her blue eyes tracked Isolde with cold calculation. On Kaelin's other side sat an older man with silver-streaked hair, his resemblance marking him as a relative. "Alpha King," Lyra announced, bowing. "I present Isolde Thorne and Mira Thorne of River Oak Village." Kaelin nodded. "Approach, Isolde Thorne." Isolde squeezed Mira's hand before stepping forward alone, stopping at a respectful distance. "Council of Ironwood," she greeted, addressing the entire table. "Thank you for receiving me." A murmur rippled through the assembled shifters. The silver-haired man leaned forward. "Well spoken for a village girl. I am Thorne Ironwood, elder of the pack and uncle to our Alpha King." For the next hour, Isolde answered questions about River Oak, crops, livestock, craftspeople, population. She was truthful but careful, emphasizing strengths without overstating them. Lady Serena's questions were particularly pointed, designed to make Isolde stumble. "And what of your defenses?" Serena asked, her voice like silk over steel. "Surely River Oak must have some protection against wilderness threats." "We have walls, though they would not withstand a determined attack," Isolde replied. "Our hunters are skilled with bow and spear, but they hunt deer, not warriors." "Yet you speak with such confidence," Serena pressed, "as if you believe yourself to be among equals rather than conquerors." Isolde met her icy stare. "I speak as I am, my lady. To pretend otherwise would dishonor both of us." "Honor?" Serena laughed. "What would a human know of—" "Enough." Kaelin cut through the hall like a blade. "You've answered well, Isolde Thorne. But there is one question I would ask myself. Why did you volunteer to come here? The truth. To protect my sister," she began carefully. "To protect my village." "Noble but incomplete," Kaelin challenged. "There are other ways you might have tried to protect them." "Why this way?" Isolde chose honesty. "Because I saw an opportunity where others saw only threat. Your pack is expanding. That cannot be stopped. But how you rule what you take, that can be influenced. I believe I can help shape a peace that benefits both our peoples." Murmurs erupted, some outraged, others intrigued. Serena's face went rigid with fury. "You presume that a human could influence the Ironwood pack?" She spat. "That we need your guidance to rule?" "I presume only that knowledge is valuable," Isolde replied evenly, "and that unnecessary suffering benefits no one, wolf or human." Kaelin smiled, a small quirk of his lips that transformed his stern features. "Well said. The human Isolde will serve as liaison between Ironwood and River Oak. She and her sister will remain here as honored guests of the pack. I trust my council will extend them every courtesy." "Of course, my love," Serena said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "We live to serve your vision." Later, Kaelin led Isolde to a balcony overlooking the valley. The night spread before them like velvet, stars scattered across it like diamonds. "River Oak lies beyond that ridge," Kaelin said, pointing. "A day's ride." "Why am I really here?" Isolde asked, turning to face him. "The truth, Alpha King." Kaelin leaned against the stone balustrade. "Because you intrigue me. In all my years, I've never encountered a human who stood their ground as you did. Who spoke to me as an equal without either fear or arrogance. Is that so rare? Rarer than you imagine." He turned to study her. "What are you, Isolde Thorne? What makes you different?" The question caught her off guard. "I'm not different. I'm just me. And yet here you stand on my balcony, unafraid, questioning the Alpha King when most would be grateful merely to be alive." Isolde considered this. "Perhaps it's because I've faced worse things than death." Something shifted in Kaelin's expression. "Such as loss," she said simply. "Responsibility. The knowledge that others depend on you, and that your fear could doom them. My parents died when I was 12. Mira was 5. I've been responsible for her ever since." Kaelin was silent for a long moment. "Your duties as liaison will be simple. You will help us understand human customs and needs. You will travel between here and River Oak, ensuring that tribute requirements are met without undue hardship. And you will report directly to me. And in return, your village will be protected, not just from outside threats, but from the excesses of my own warriors. Your people will be treated fairly, so long as they remain loyal. And Mira, She will remain here with you. She is not a servant. She is under my protection, as are you. Why? Isolde asked. Why extend such protection to humans you barely know? Kaelin stepped closer. In the moonlight, his features seemed carved from shadow and silver. Because something in you calls to something in me, he said, his voice dropping. And I would know what that is before I decide your final place in my kingdom. He reached out to brush his knuckles along her cheek, the touch feather-light yet burning. Rest well, Isolde Thorn. Tomorrow your real work begins. Isolde's first week at Ironwood passed in a blur. She was treated as an honored guest, given freedom to move about most areas, to speak with both shifters and human servants. Mira had adapted with the resilience of youth, finding a place in the herb gardens. Isolde herself studied maps, questioned servants about supply routes, observed training sessions. Knowledge was power, and she intended to gather as much as she could. On this particular morning, she found herself in the training grounds with Lyra, who had offered to teach her self-defense. The first rule, Lyra said, circling her, is to understand that you will never overpower a shifter. We're stronger, faster, and have better reflexes. Your advantage lies elsewhere. In what? Isolde asked. Observation, anticipation, and the fact that most shifters underestimate humans. For the next hour, Lyra demonstrated techniques for escaping holds and using an opponent's momentum against them. Isolde was a quick study, though her body would certainly be bruised by evening. As they finished, Thorn approached. My nephew asks that you join him for the hunt today. Isolde blinked in surprise. The hunt? A regular activity of the pack, Thorn explained. Usually reserved for shifters only, but Kaelin seems determined to break with tradition where you're concerned. I'm not much of a hunter, Isolde admitted. You won't be expected to participate, merely to observe. From horseback, of course. Isolde glanced at Lyra, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Then I would be honored to accept. An hour later, Isolde found herself in the courtyard, mounted on a chestnut mare. Around her, shifters prepared for the hunt, checking weapons, adjusting saddles, some already shifting into wolf form. And then Kaelin appeared, and all other activity seemed to fade into the background. He wore black leather, unadorned save for a silver clasp at his throat. His dark hair was pulled back, emphasizing his sharp features, but it was his eyes that caught Isolde's attention. They seemed to glow. The amber deepened to burnished gold, alert and predatory. This was not the calculated ruler she had glimpsed in council meetings. This was something wilder, more dangerous, and infinitely more compelling. Kaelin approached her. You came, he said, his voice rougher than usual. Did you doubt I would? I never know what to expect from you, Isolde Thorn. That's part of the appeal. They rode through forest trails, Kaelin pointing out signs Isolde would have missed. A broken branch, disturbed leaves, faint hoofprints. They crested a ridge to find a herd of deer grazing below. Kaelin gave a low whistle, and the forest exploded into motion. Wolves burst from the trees, while mounted shifters circled to cut off escape routes. It was both terrible and magnificent, the primal dance of predator and prey. Come, Kaelin said, extending his hand. There's something I want to show you. They rode deeper into the forest, emerging into a secluded clearing. At its center stood an ancient oak, its massive trunk carved with symbols, spirals, wolf heads, and stranger markings. The heart tree, Kaelin explained. The first alpha of Ironwood made a pact beneath these branches, binding our pact to this land. A pact with whom? The forest itself. Or so the stories say. The land would sustain us, and in return, we would protect it. Isolde looked up at him, surprised by the reverence in his voice. I didn't expect the mighty Alpha King to believe in such tales. There is power in old stories, Kaelin replied, in traditions, but there is also power in breaking with tradition when necessary. The air between them seemed to thicken. Isolde was acutely aware of how alone they were. Is that why you brought me here? She asked. To break with tradition? Kaelin stepped closer. I brought you here because I wanted to show you something important to me, something few outsiders have ever seen. Why? His hand came up to cup her cheek. Because you see me, Isolde Thorn. Not just the Alpha King, not just the Conqueror. You see me. And then he was kissing her, his lips claiming hers with a hunger that stole her breath. Isolde knew she should resist, should remember all the reasons this was dangerous, impossible. Instead, she pulled him closer. returning the kiss with equal fervor. When they finally broke apart, Kalen rested his forehead against hers. "This cannot be," he whispered. "I know," Isolde replied. "I am promised to Serena, a political alliance that will strengthen both our pacts." "I know," she repeated, forcing herself to step back. Kalen caught her hand. "But I cannot stop thinking about you, about what I feel when you're near." A twig snapped behind them, and they broke apart. Lyra emerged, her expression grim. "Alpha, forgive the interruption, but you're needed. Northern Pack warriors have crossed our borders. Lady Serena claims no knowledge of their presence." Kalen's face hardened. "Gather the hunters. We ride east immediately." He turned back to Isolde. "I must go." "Of course." He touched her cheek one last time. "What happened here? We will speak of it later." Isolde watched him go, her lips still burning from his kiss, her heart torn between exhilaration and dread. Whatever path they had set upon, it could lead only to danger. For her, for Kalen, for both their peoples. And yet, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. For better or worse, her fate was now bound to Kalen's, as surely as the Ironwood Pack was bound to this forest. A storm was brewing over Ironwood. Isolde could feel it in the air as she stood at her chamber window, watching dark clouds gather above the forest. 3 days had passed since the hunt, since Kalen's kiss beneath the heart tree, and she had barely seen him since. The northern warriors had been captured at the border, their presence explained away as a hunting party that had strayed too far from their territory. But few in Ironwood believed this story, least of all Kalen, who had doubled the guards along the eastern boundaries and called his war council into session. Rumors flew through the stronghold like autumn leaves, whispers of northern treachery, of an impending attack, of Lady Serena's possible involvement in her father's schemes. The human servants spoke in hushed tones of preparations for war, and even Mira had noticed the tension. "Are we in danger?" her sister had asked that morning, her young face solemn. "No," Isolde had answered with more confidence than she felt. "The Alpha King protects us." But as she watched the storm clouds gather, Isolde wondered if that protection would extend to a human who had dared to kiss a king promised to another. Lyra had seen them, and while the warrior seemed loyal to Kalen, who else might have witnessed their moment beneath the heart tree? A knock at her door interrupted these dark thoughts. Isolde turned to find Lyra herself entering, her face grim. "The Alpha King requests your presence in the council chamber," she announced. Immediately, Isolde's heart quickened. Has something happened? The Northern Alpha arrives within the hour. Negotiations are to begin regarding the border incursion. Lyra hesitated. Lady Serena's father. Understanding dawned. This would be no ordinary council meeting, but a direct confrontation between Kalen and his future father-in-law, and he wanted Isolde there. "Why me?" she asked, though she suspected the answer. Lyra's expression remained carefully neutral. "He says you see things others miss." 10 minutes later, Isolde followed Lyra through the stone corridors to a chamber smaller than the Great Hall, but no less imposing. Unlike the public gathering space, this room was clearly designed for war planning. A massive table dominated the center, covered with maps and markers representing troop movements and territorial boundaries. Kalen stood at the head of the table, deep in conversation with Thorn and several other advisors. He looked up as she entered, his amber eyes finding hers across the room. For a brief moment, something flickered in his gaze. A warmth, a recognition, before the mask of the Alpha King slipped back into place. "Isolde," he acknowledged with a nod. "Thank you for coming." Lady Serena, standing at Kalen's right hand, did not bother to hide her displeasure. "Is this wise, my love? Involving a human in pack matters, especially with my father arriving?" "Isolde has proven herself observant and clear-headed," Kalen replied, his tone brooking no argument. "I value those qualities, particularly now." Serena's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing more, her glacial gaze shifting to Isolde with unmistakable warning. Thorn cleared his throat. "Perhaps you should explain the situation to our liaison." Kalen gestured Isolde closer to the map. "The Northern Pack claims their warriors crossed our borders by accident, but our scouts report they were following established patrol routes, armed for combat rather than hunting. A provocation," Isolde surmised. "Or a test of our defenses," Thorn added. "Either way, Alpha Frostfang now travels here personally to resolve the misunderstanding," Kalen continued. "He brings a small honor guard, But our spies report larger forces gathering in the north. War preparations, one of the other advisors growled. Isolde studied the map, noting the markers representing Ironwood and northern territories. What does he want? More land? The Northern Pack has always coveted our access to the eastern trade routes, Thorne explained. But that's not all. My father wants what he has always wanted, Serena interjected, her voice cold. Power, influence, security for his bloodline, which is why our betrothal was arranged, Kaelin added, not looking at either Serena or Isolde. A joining of the two strongest packs in the region, securing peace through alliance rather than conquest. The unsaid hung heavy in the air. If Kaelin broke his betrothal to Serena, the fragile peace would shatter. War would follow, with all its attendant bloodshed and suffering. I understand, Isolde said quietly, and she did. Whatever had passed between them beneath the heart tree could not, must not, interfere with the safety of both their peoples. Kaelin's jaw tightened, but he only nodded. During the negotiations, I want you to observe Alpha Frostfang and his wolves. Look for what they might be concealing, for reactions that don't match their words. You want me to be your spy, Isolde clarified. I want you to be my eyes when mine must remain fixed on diplomatic concerns. Before Isolde could respond, horns sounded from the watchtower. The northern delegation had arrived. The council chamber emptied as everyone moved to the great hall for the formal reception. Isolde found herself walking beside Thorne, the elder's pace slower than the others. My nephew plays a dangerous game, he commented, his voice low enough that only she could hear. The negotiations? Isolde asked innocently. Thorne gave her a knowing look. You know that's not what I mean. Isolde felt heat rise to her cheeks. Nothing has happened that would endanger the alliance. Yet, Thorne's tone was not unkind. But I've lived long enough to recognize when the winds of fate are shifting. Be careful, Isolde Thorne. Hearts and politics rarely mix well, and the consequences extend far beyond the two caught in the storm. With that ominous warning, they entered the great hall, where the atmosphere crackled with tension, despite the formal pleasantries being exchanged. Alpha Frostfang stood at the center of the hall, a tall, powerfully built man with hair the same white blonde as his daughter's, though his was shot through with silver. His eyes, a paler blue than Serena's, surveyed the room with calculating precision. Isolde positioned herself to the side, observing as Kaelin welcomed his future father-in-law with all the proper protocol. Serena stood beside her father, her perfect posture and serene expression betraying nothing of the earlier tension in the council chamber. We have much to discuss, Alpha Kaelin, Frostfang said, his deep voice carrying throughout the hall. But first, I hear you've acquired something of interest, a human liaison with unusual courage. All eyes turned to Isolde, including Frostfang's pale, assessing gaze. She felt a chill run down her spine at the calculating look in those eyes. Isolde Thorne of River Oak, Kaelin introduced her, gesturing her forward. She serves as a bridge between our pack and the human settlements under our protection. Isolde stepped forward, keeping her expression neutral as she bowed her head respectfully. Alpha Frostfang. The Northern Alpha circled her slowly, much as Kaelin had done during their first meeting in River Oak. Unlike then, however, Isolde felt nothing but cold dread at this scrutiny. Interesting, Frostfang mused. No fear scent. Unusual in a human. He stopped in front of her, too close for comfort. Tell me, human, what do you think of wolves? A test, and an obvious one. Isolde met his gaze steadily. I think they are as varied as humans, Alpha Frostfang. Some are cruel, some kind. Some wise, some foolish. I judge each by their actions, not their nature. Frostfang's lips curved in what might have been amusement or displeasure. It was impossible to tell. Diplomatic. No wonder my future son-in-law values your counsel. Something in the way he said it made Isolde wonder if he knew more than he should about her relationship with Kaelin. She glanced at Serena, whose expression had hardened into marble. Shall we proceed to more pressing matters? Kaelin suggested, smoothly drawing attention away from Isolde. Your warriors trespassed on Ironwood territory, armed for battle rather than hunting. Frostfang waved a dismissive hand. A misunderstanding, nothing more. Young wolves, eager to prove themselves, straying beyond their assigned patrol routes. Patrol routes that shouldn't have been anywhere near our border, Thorne pointed out. Precautions, Elder Ironwood. The forests grow dangerous these days. Rogues, bandits, humans with ideas above their station. Frostfang's gaze flickered briefly to Isolde. The negotiations continued in this vein. Veiled accusations met with plausible denials, underlying threats couched in diplomatic language. Isolde watched carefully, noting how Frostfang's honor guard positioned themselves throughout the hall, how their hands never strayed far from their weapons. More concerning was the way Serena communicated with her father through subtle gestures and glances, a private language that excluded everyone else in the room. They were coordinating something, but what? As the formal part of the negotiations concluded and the gathering transitioned to a feast, Isolde found herself approached by one of Frostfang's wolves, a lean, sharp-featured man with calculating eyes. "The famous human liaison," he said, his tone just shy of mocking. "I'm Vane, Beta to Alpha Frostfang." "A pleasure," Isolde replied neutrally. "Is it?" Vane's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I wonder what truly keeps you here, human. What hold you have over the mighty Alpha Kalen that he values your presence so highly?" Isolde maintained her composure. "I serve the interests of both wolves and humans. Nothing more." "Nothing more," Vane repeated, his gaze sliding meaningfully toward Kalen, who was deep in conversation with Frostfang. Some might disagree. Before Isolde could respond, Lyra appeared at her side. "The Alpha King requests your presence," she said, her tone making it clear this was a rescue rather than an actual summons. Vane inclined his head with mock deference and melted back into the crowd. Isolde released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "They know," she whispered to Lyra. "They suspect," Lyra corrected. "But suspicion is not proof. What happens if they prove it?" Lyra's expression darkened. "War. The Northern Pack would see it as an insult, a human chosen over Serena. They would attack, and other packs would join them, fearing that Kalen has grown weak, corrupted by human influence." The gravity of the situation settled over Isolde like a physical weight. What had seemed like a private matter, her feelings for Kalen, his for her, suddenly loomed as a potential catalyst for bloodshed on a massive scale. "I should leave," she said, the words burning her throat even as she spoke them. "Return to River Oak. Remove myself from the equation." "And you think that would solve anything?" Lyra asked. "The damage is done, Isolde. Kalen's interest in you is already noted. Your departure would only confirm suspicions and make you an easier target away from his protection." As the evening progressed, Isolde found herself increasingly isolated, avoided by the Ironwood wolves who seemed to sense the brewing conflict and watched with predatory interest by the Northerners. She retreated to a quiet corner, trying to think through her limited options. "You look troubled, human." Isolde turned to find Serena standing behind her, a goblet of wine in her perfectly manicured hand. "Lady Serena," Isolde acknowledged. The negotiations seemed tense. Indeed. Serena sipped her wine, her blue eyes never leaving Isolde's face. But negotiations of all kinds require flexibility, the ability to sacrifice personal desires for greater goals. The implication was clear. Isolde straightened her shoulders. "I understand sacrifice better than you might think, my lady." "Do you?" Serena stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Then understand this. What you feel for him, what he may feel for you. It is a passing fascination, a momentary weakness. But what I offer is strength, alliance, security for both our packs. I've never disputed that. Yet your very presence disputes it." Serena's perfect facade cracked slightly, revealing genuine emotion beneath. Not just anger, but pain. "He was mine before you arrived. Our future was certain." For the first time, Isolde saw beyond Serena's icy exterior to the woman beneath, a woman raised from birth to fulfill a political purpose, whose entire identity was built around becoming Kalen's mate and queen. In her own way, Serena was as trapped as Isolde had ever been. "I don't wish to destroy your future, Lady Serena," Isolde said softly. "Then leave," Serena replied, equally soft but infinitely more dangerous. "Tonight, because if you remain, I cannot guarantee your safety when my father's patience runs out." She departed as silently as she had appeared, leaving Isolde with the chilling certainty that Serena's warning was no empty threat. The feast continued around her, but Isolde barely noticed, her mind racing with possibilities and consequences. Kalen remained engaged with Frostfang, though his eyes occasionally sought her across the room, his expression unreadable to all but her. She recognized the conflict in his gaze because it mirrored her own. As the evening drew to a close, Isolde slipped away from the great hall, needing space to think. She found herself on the balcony where she and Kaelin had spoken that first night. The valley spread below her, now shrouded in darkness as the storm clouds had blotted out the stars. The first drops of rain had just begun to fall when she heard footsteps behind her. She knew without turning that it was Kaelin. "You should be with your guests," she said, not facing him. "They are retiring for the night." He moved to stand beside her, close but not touching. "You've been avoiding me." "With good reason." Isolde finally turned to look at him. "Your future father-in-law suspects something between us, as does Serena." "I know." His jaw tightened. Frostfang made several pointed comments about the proper place of humans in the pack hierarchy. "He threatened me?" "Not directly. He's too clever for that." Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating Kaelin's face in stark relief. The sharp angles of his cheekbones, the determined set of his mouth, the turmoil in his amber eyes. "This cannot continue," Isolde said, the words like stones in her throat. "What happened at the heart tree was not a mistake." Kaelin interrupted fiercely. "Don't say it was." "Then what was it?" Isolde demanded. "The beginning of a war? Because that's what it will become if we pursue this, whatever this is between us." Kaelin's hand reached for hers, his touch sending the same electric current through her that it had since the first time their skin had met. "I don't know what this is," he admitted. "I only know that since you walked into my life, nothing has been the same. Nothing has felt as right as when I'm with you. And the alliance with the Northern Pack, the peace it's meant to secure." Pain flashed across his features. "I know my duty, Isolde. I've always known it. But for the first time, I find myself questioning whether duty alone is enough to build a future upon." "It has to be," Isolde insisted, even as her heart rebelled against her own words. "Too many lives depend on it." Thunder rumbled overhead, the storm moving closer. Rain began to fall in earnest, but neither of them moved to seek shelter. "What if there was another way?" Kaelin asked suddenly. "Another path to peace that didn't require my mating with Serena?" "Is there?" Isolde asked, afraid to hope. Before he could answer, the balcony door burst open. Lyra stood there, her expression urgent. "Alpha, forgive the interruption, but there's been an incident. One of the northern wolves attacked a human servant." Kaelin's posture changed instantly, the vulnerable man disappearing behind the Alpha King's authority. "How bad?" "The servant lives, but is badly injured. The northern wolf claims the human disrespected him, but witnesses say the attack was unprovoked." "Where is Frostfang?" demanding the servant be punished for inciting the incident. Kaelin's eyes flashed with anger. "Bring the Northern Alpha to the council chamber, now." As Lyra departed, Kaelin turned back to Isolde. "This is a deliberate provocation. A test of how you value human lives," Isolde agreed. "If you punish the servant, I show that humans under my protection are expendable. And if you punish the Northern Wolf, I risk insulting Frostfang and potentially breaking the alliance before it's even formalized." They stared at each other, the implications clear. This was no random incident, but a calculated move in a larger game, one that placed Kaelin's treatment of humans, and by extension his relationship with Isolde, at the center of the conflict. "I need to go," Kaelin said, already moving toward the door. "Stay here. Stay safe." "Wait," Isolde called after him. "What are you going to do?" He paused, looking back at her with a determination that sent a shiver down her spine. "What I should have done from the beginning. The truth, Isolde. It's time for truth." With that cryptic statement, he was gone, leaving Isolde alone on the balcony as the storm raged around her, a perfect mirror to the turmoil within. She waited only moments before making her decision. If truth was coming, she needed to be there to witness it, to face whatever consequences followed. The council chamber was already tense when Isolde slipped in through a side door, positioning herself behind a column where she could observe without being immediately noticed. Kaelin stood at the head of the table, his posture rigid, facing Frostfang across its length. Serena stood at her father's side, her expression carefully blank. "The human provoked my warrior," Frostfang was saying, his tone dismissive. "Such disrespect cannot be tolerated, even from your pets." "The human was carrying out his duties as instructed," Kaelin replied coldly. "Your warrior attacked without provocation, as confirmed by multiple witnesses, both human and wolf. And you would take their word over that of a northern warrior. Frostfang's eyebrows rose. Interesting priorities, Alpha Kalen. Justice is my priority, Kalen countered, as it should be for any alpha worthy of the title. The insult, thinly veiled though it was, landed like a slap. Frostfang's expression darkened. I begin to wonder if this alliance truly serves the Northern Pack's interests. You seem increasingly sympathetic to humans. Some might say overly so. If treating those under my protection with basic decency makes me sympathetic, then yes, I am. It makes you weak, Frostfang snarled, dropping all pretense of diplomacy. As does your obvious infatuation with that human woman. A deadly silence fell over the chamber. Serena's composure finally cracked, her face flushing with humiliation as her father named aloud what had been only whispered until now. Kalen's voice, when he spoke, was dangerously quiet. Be very careful with your next words, Frostfang. Or what? The Northern Alpha challenged. You'll break our alliance? Go to war over a human? If necessary. The simple statement sent shockwaves through the room. Isolde felt her heart stutter in her chest. Surely he couldn't mean. Father, Serena interjected, her voice strained. Perhaps we should. Be silent, Frostfang snapped. This has gone beyond you now. He turned back to Kalen, his pale eyes cold with calculation. So this is your choice? A human liaison over the daughter of the Northern Alpha? Over peace between our packs? My choice, Kalen said deliberately, is to rule as I see fit, with whom I choose at my side. The alliance I offered was genuine, but it will not be built on the subjugation of those weaker than ourselves. That is not strength, Frostfang. It is cruelty masquerading as power. Pretty words, Frostfang sneered, but meaningless. Without our alliance, your territory will be vulnerable from the north. Do you think the other packs will stand with you when they learn you've chosen a human over a proper mate? I think they will stand with the stronger alpha, Kalen replied. And strength is not measured only in claws and teeth, but in wisdom and justice. Frostfang's laugh was harsh. We shall see. Come, Serena. We leave this place. But Serena didn't move. She stood frozen, her gaze fixed on Kalen. You would do this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Throw away everything we were meant to be, for her? For the first time, Kalen's expression softened slightly. I would never have made you happy, Serena. Nor you me. We both know this. I would have been your queen, she said, her voice breaking on the last word. You will be a queen, Kalen assured her. But not mine. Frostfang's face had turned thunderous. This insult will not stand, Kalen Ironwood. The Northern Pack withdraws from all negotiations. Prepare your borders for war. With that, he stormed from the chamber, his wolves following in his wake. Serena lingered a moment longer, her eyes filled with a mixture of fury and grief, before she too departed, her back straight with wounded pride. As the door closed behind them, a heavy silence descended. Thorn was the first to break it, stepping forward to stand beside his nephew. Well, the elder said dryly, that could have gone better. It went exactly as expected, Kalen replied, his voice weary. Frostfang has been looking for an excuse to break the alliance for months. He never intended peace, only to position himself close enough to strike when we were vulnerable. And Serena? Thorn asked. Was she part of his plans? I don't know. Kalen's gaze finally found Isolde, still standing half-hidden behind the column. But I suspect we'll find out soon enough. Isolde stepped forward, her heart pounding. What happens now? Now, Kalen said. We prepare for war. Frostfang will not forgive this perceived insult. He will attack, and soon. Because of me, Isolde stated, the weight of it settling on her shoulders like lead. No, Kalen said firmly, crossing to her and taking her hands in his. Because of him. Because of his pride and ambition. This was inevitable, Isolde. If not over you, then over something else. At least now we face him with our eyes open, not blinded by false promises of alliance. Isolde wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at her. Your people will blame me, a human who turned their alpha against his own kind. My people trust me, Kalen countered, and those who don't will learn to, or they can leave. I meant what I said to Frostfang. Strength is not measured in cruelty, but in justice, in protecting those who cannot protect themselves. He pulled her closer, heedless of the others in the room, in finding the courage to follow your heart, even when duty pulls you elsewhere. You realize, Thorn interjected, sounding resigned rather than disapproving, that this changes everything. No alpha has ever taken a human mate. Then it's time for change, Kalen replied, his eyes never leaving Isolde's. The old ways brought us endless cycles of violence and conquest. Perhaps new ways will bring something better. Isolde felt tears prick at her eyes. You can't be certain of that. I am certain of you, Kalen said softly, of what I feel when I'm with you, of the vision you showed me, wolves and humans living together as equals, not master and servant. Thunder crashed outside, the storm reaching its peak as Isolde stood at the center of a different kind of tempest, one that had the power to reshape the world she knew. There will be challenges, she warned. Opposition. Not everyone will accept this. No, Kalen agreed, but enough will. Those who matter will. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. The question is, will you? Knowing the risks, the obstacles we'll face, will you stand with me, Isolde Thorn? Not as my liaison, but as my equal, my mate. Isolde looked into his amber eyes, seeing not just the Alpha King, but the man beneath. The man who had recognized something in her from that first moment in River Oak, just as she had recognized something in him. Yes, she whispered, the word both a promise and a beginning. I will stand with you, through whatever comes. As their lips met, sealing the promise between them, the storm outside began to subside, the rain softening to a gentle patter against the stone walls of ironwood. And in that moment, surrounded by the uncertain future they had chosen, Isolde and Kalen found a certainty in each other that no war, no opposition, no ancient tradition could shake. The Alpha King had watched the humans stay calm during the invasion, and her next move had not just shocked the pack, it had changed it forever. If you enjoyed this story, a like or comment really helps, and if you wish to hear more tales like this one, make sure you subscribe so you never miss the next tale.